Hello, today I'll be talking about David's representations of Napoleon. For a little background, Napoleon Bonaparte was a French emperor who conquered most of Europe during the 19th century. During the French Revolution, he quickly rose through the military ranks, and afterwards he seized political power and crowned himself Emperor of France, an act that marked his independence from the Church. He was successful in many wars against European nations, which expanded his empire. Though after failing to invade Russia, he left the throne and was exiled to the island of Elba. He later escaped Elba, however, and returned to power for a little while during his 100 Days campaign. But after he was defeated once again, he was exiled to the island of St. Helena, and that's where he died. Another important historical context is the French Revolution. During this time, French citizens redesigned the country's political landscape and uprooted old institutions like the absolute monarchy and the feudal system. It's considered the most violent revolution, and it was brought on by discontentment with the monarchy and the poor economic choices made by the prior kings. French artist Jacques-Louis David was Napoleon's court painter and was tasked with creating a stable representation of Napoleon. David admired his charisma and ideals, and Napoleon saw the advantage of having a celebrated painter support his cause. They both knew how influential art was, and, together, they made a great team for spreading propaganda, which aided Napoleon's hold on power for more than a decade and created an even longer-lasting myth of his military power. Napoleon was trying his best to convince people that his government wasn't a military dictatorship, which would have gone against the ideas of the French Revolution that had just occurred. In order to further this idea, he had David and other artists paint portraits of him wearing civilian clothing, which gave him the image that he was a statesman. He also had his paintings done in such a way that helped cover up his negative personality traits and give him and his government less of a dictatorship and overall better image. In the work Bonaparte Crossing the Alps, which was finished in 1801, David worked to validate Napoleon's power since he wasn't of noble birth or lineage. He's depicted rearing a horse while French troops push a cannon with the national flag of France in the background. On the rocks on the bottom left, Hannibal, Charlemagne, and Napoleon's names are carved together, linking him with these great military leaders. This painting shows Napoleon's power, depicts him as a hero, and suggests that he can do almost anything. David didn't make many drafts or studies prior to his painting Bonaparte Crossing the Alps. A reason for this could be because Napoleon refused to sit for him, so David had to use political iconography as opposed to realism. He had his son model on a ladder for the prose and used a bust to get some of Napoleon's features. David was able to borrow his uniform, though, so that's more true to real life. He used 3 layers for this painting: the basic outline, in which he'd take a brush and a little paint and concentrate on blocks of light and shade. The second layer, he filled out details and made corrections. And the last layer, he did the finishing touches, such as blending the tones and smoothing everything out. And this was the method he used for most of his paintings. The Coronation of Napoleon painting, which was finished in 1807, depicts Napoleon crowning his wife Empress. It takes place in the Notre Dame Cathedral. In it, Napoleon is standing on the stage above his wife, who's kneeling on a pillow on the steps, about to place the crown on her head. Napoleon's wearing robes similar to robes worn by Roman emperors, which is an indication of his arrogance. This ceremony is an important moment, as it's the moment that France was changed back into a monarchy after it was a republic for a few years after the French Revolution. Originally, the painting was going to depict Napoleon crowning himself emperor, but was changed in order to present a less authoritarian image and to make him look more generous and less selfish. Other changes were also made. Napoleon's mother had skipped out on the coronation due to the fact that she was upset about his relationship with his brothers. He also added in his brother Joseph, even though Joseph didn't even get an invitation to the coronation. A less drastic change from reality is that Napoleon's sisters are depicted just standing there, when in reality, he required them to hold his wife's train during the ceremony. The last painting of Napoleon that David did was called The Emperor Napoleon in his study at the Tuileries. The painting shows him standing by his desk wearing a colonel of the Foot Grenadiers of the Imperial Guard uniform. His unbuttoned cuffs, wrinkled leggings, and disheveled hair, along with the time on the clock that points to 4:13 a.m. and the burning candles indicate that he's been up all night working. The word code is written on one of the papers on his desk, so we can assume that he was up writing the Napoleonic Code, which gave post-revolutionary France its first set of laws about colonial affairs, property, and individual and family rights. The sword on the chair represents his military success, his code represents his administrative success, and the other decorations, like the heraldic bees on the chair, imply his power. David played an important part in giving Napoleon the image that he has today. Together they were able to spread propaganda and extend Napoleon's rule far past what it probably would have been if David had not been his court painter. If you heard any bird chirps in the background, I apologize. That is my bird herding.